Hello, my name is Steve Gotch from Jama Software, and today we're going to focus on customer with BIRT. BIRT is the business intelligence reporting tool that is an open source tool that is supported by IBM and Actuate. To give you an example of the BIRT reports, I'm going to access the reports area from within Contour and focus on the global reports. The global reports are reports that can be ran from anywhere within the system regardless of what the user is looking at. They're a parameter-based report and they rely on SQL to get the data for the report. These are the reports that we provide out of the box. However, there is one here that's a sample BIRT report that I'm going to run just to give you a feeling for what we can do with the BIRT reports, as well as a preview for the report that we'll be creating today. So I'm going to select Word as the output, and I'm going to select Use Cases and run the report. Once the report is run and downloaded, I'll open it up and let me bring it over here to show you. So here we can see it's a simple sample report. We have a title, today's date, icons. You could put your company logo there. As we scroll down, we can see that we have a footer with a confidential statement, a page 1 of 4, and then here we can see where the actual use cases are. So we have the name of the use case, the ID for the use case, and then the text from the use case. So here we can see just some of the simple pieces of output that you can have with your report. Now today, we're going to focus on really just getting BIRT installed and working with the tool. Giving an overview of how to connect to the database, the Contour database, creating a query, so how do we get information out of the database that we need, then creating a template within the BIRT tool, and then inserting that data from the SQL query. Once that is in place, we'll add a simple parameter, so we'll add a set to select from, so we can get our query focused on the information that we need, and then finally we'll test this report. Now, BIRT does offer several nice videos on usages of the tool, as well as including options for sample data sets, as well as some graphical reporting options. Highly recommend that you review the BIRT resources and take advantage of those pieces to learn how to leverage the tool for your needs. SQL knowledge is also kind of a requirement. Obviously we're going to be querying the database, and so knowledge of SQL is helpful, but we do provide documentation of Contour schema on our jamasoftware.com site, so you will be able to review there. However, knowing SQL will be so the first thing we'll do is look into getting BIRT on your system. So I just did a quick BIRT search here, and I'm going to go to the Eclipse BIRT home. Now there's a newer version of BIRT out, 2.6.1, but we want to focus on 2.5.2. And so this is the version of BIRT that is shipped with Contour. We'll likely update to 2.6.1 in the near future, but currently 2.5.2 is the version that we are supporting. From here, we have a couple different options. The option you're likely going to choose is the Rcp Designer. And what is this? This is a dedicated report designer. And so you'll download this tool and you'll be able to just run the report designer as a standalone application. It does require that you have the Java JDK installed, and it'll take you through those different steps. Today I'm actually going to be running mine through the Eclipse IDE. This is a development environment that is required for my system because I'm running Windows 64-bit, but if you're not running Windows 64-bit, you can just use the RCP. Once you download the tool, you'll see that there's just a list of files here within the folder. These files do not require any installation. You'll just be able to run this BIRT executable. Again, you'll need to have the Java JDK installed, but there's a lot of instructions here on how to do that. So the first thing you're going to want to do to familiarize yourself with the layout of BIRT, as well as what a template looks like, is to open one of the files that was included with Contour. Hopefully you've installed your own development environment of Contour, and this was covered in the overview, because you're not going to want to do your development within the production version of Contour. Please look at the help section on how to install Contour, or see the overview video for instructions on how to install your own environment. Once that's available, you can open the file and here we can see within our Apache web directory that's been installed to host the Contour application. Within the Contour application itself, and mine has got a sublabel of 299 here because that's the version I'm running, and I have several versions available. But as I navigate down to the web info and then within the reports area, I have the different types of reports that can be run. We're going to be focusing today on the BIRT, and then I can see all the different report templates that are shipped with Contour and available for you to look at. I'm just going to pick the simple artifact types. Now the extension here is the Rpt Design. This is the extension that you're going to want to use and upload to Contour that holds the actual template. The Rpt Config is simply a configuration file that BIRT uses when you're creating the reports. These files aren't necessary for when you upload your report. So once we've opened our report, now we can see how the different pieces of the BIRT Designer are laid out. So here we have the Data Explorer where we can see the data sources and the data sets. And so this is the connection to the database. And this is where you'll be able to instruct it to connect to hopefully your own local database, or if you have a database server, point it to that. The data sets contain the SQL. So here we can see the different SQL queries that we have available for this report and the different fields that they will return. As we come down here to the bottom left-hand corner, we have the outline of the report. So again, we have this information above that's been repeated, but the main area here as well as the body. And the body here contains the labels and the table. So this is the information that's going to be laid out within. The next area here is the actual report data. So this gives you a nice preview of what this report's going to look like once it's ran. We can see the formatting, the different font sizes, as well as the field. As we mouse around, we can also see that the tool is helping us see the different sections here that describe where the data comes from. The bottom area here is simply the properties for whatever is selected in the top. So right now we're just looking at the overall report properties, but if I were to click on a table or a field, we can see how these properties are going to change to show that piece of information. So let's create our own. To do this, we're going to click New and Report. When we do this, the BIRT Designer is going to ask us where we want to save it, the name, and we'll call this our test report. So once we've named our report, we can now pick the template that we want to use to start our report with. We can obviously start with a blank open report, but we could include my first report, which is a nice way to start off. It gives you a simple customer listing and contact fields for the sample data that comes with BIRT. But there's also more sophisticated reports such as columns, charts, and crosstabs. And so there's a lot of nice places to start there to help you get your report laid out. We're going to start with a blank report today because our main focus is to just get you familiar with using the tool and inserting data from Contour. Once we have our template, we can see now that we have the same layout that we had in our sample. So the first thing we're going to want to do is create a data source, and this data source is the connection to the database. We're going to do this via Jdbc, and we'll just give it a name here of Contour. So then the next thing is to get the driver class and the URL. So the driver that we're going to be using is the MySQL Jdbc driver. The driver you're going to use will be unique for your database if you're not using the MySQL database. So if you're using SQL Server or Oracle, you'll need to use the appropriate drivers. The driver URL will be the URL used to connect to the database. The easiest way to get the URL if you're connected locally is to go to the Help section, Custom Report Development, the BIRT Overview, and Installing BIRT. So within here we have the common URLs for the databases that we support. Now these are specifically set up for local hosts, so this means that the database is going to be on your local machine, but if it's on a server you just replace that local host with the appropriate server name. And if you don't know that, your admin should be able to help you. So I'm going to copy this value and then paste it back into the URL section of the JDBC piece. So again, this localhost would be the server name. I'm running the database locally, and then the contour here is the database name for your contour installation. I run a couple different versions of contour on my system, so I name the databases by the version of contour I'm running. Yours is likely going to just be contour. So the username, and again I'm just using the default MySQL setup, and so I'm just using root, but this would be a username for your database to connect to it. So if it's local, it might be the root or SA, but if you're connecting to a database server, it's likely your DBA or whoever set that up for you would need to provide you with that username and password. Once I have these values, I can test my connection and see if BIRT can successfully connect to the database. So now we need to create a data set. So a data set is essentially an SQL query. Now you could create your queries within BIRT if you'd like, but I find that it's much easier to do it within a true database tool. Here I'm using Toad, but you can use the default query writer that comes with MySQL or SQL Server, or potentially if SQL is not your strong point, you can describe the information that you need and maybe get an SQL query from someone more familiar with the database. So here's a simple SQL query for our report. It's got a list of fields here, many of these that you'll recognize, like project name, document name, description, as well as some you likely do not recognize, such as sort order, is folder, and the global sorter. So the main things to think about here is that some of these fields tell us what type of item it is, so whether it's an item or a folder. This provides us some information on how to format it, whether it's a section or maybe a line item within a section. The sort order provides us with that information of how does this item fit within the project. And so from our contour piece here, where we can see we have the requirements, so we have our set or document group, we have the folder, and then we have the items. And so I can recreate this in my report with that information in my query. So we have the folder information, the sort information, as well as the document group and the document. Here we can see how we built this information and how we linked it all together. The primary table that we're going to look at is the document table. So this is where all the information about all of our items is stored. The document group is going to be the set, and so it's going to be that requirements or use cases piece. The project obviously is the project where this is all going to be put in. The project release, each project manages its own list of releases, and so that's essentially a lookup table that holds the release information. We have two separate joins here to the lookup table to pull out the priority as well as the status, and so the document holds a reference to the lookup value for the priority and the status, and this join will get those values. Now we've done left joins here on these values because there's no guarantee that a release or a priority or status value has been set. And so we obviously still want to return that record even if it's a null value, and so that's why we have that left join. Now as we look down here a little bit further, I have a hard-coded document group ID, and so I'm looking at 3, and so we'll be able to see that that actually is our requirement set. And the reason why I've hard-coded this is that it's much easier as we develop our report to have a guaranteed list of results. Once we get our report formatted and get the data inserted like we want it to, I'll change this so it'll be a parameterized value, and then we can pick the set. So whether it's requirements or if it's going to be use cases or whatever, we can make that a variable. This next piece here is that the document is active. So when an item in Contour is edited, we create a new version. And so those versions are going to be available within the database. And so each of those prior versions are going to be marked as inactive or false. And so we want to make sure that we're only grabbing the current item. And so this will ensure that if an item has 6 versions, we only get the latest version. The last piece here is the sort order, and so this will guarantee that the sort order of our query results will match the sort order in Contour. So when I run this query, I'll pull it up here to give you some more space. We can see our project name, the API ID, and these are pieces that you can find within Contour's administration pieces. We reviewed how to find those pieces in our overview video. The name, the description. So the description is not shown here because it's a large field, so we could expand that and see it if we wanted to. The document key, this is the requirement. Since I've hard-coded the document group or the set to be 3, this is going to be consistent throughout the whole report. If we were to look at our document group table, we would see all the different document groups or sets that we have set up in the system. And so in my sample system, I've got multiple projects. And each of these projects are always going to have an attachment set. This is not a set that you're going to need to think about. But here we can see the other sets that we have available. And so there's change requests, there's multiple change requests, multiple defects. I have a couple requirements and a couple use cases. And so what does this mean? This means that these sets belong to different projects. And so as we look over here, we can see all the different project IDs. If I group these together, we can see project 1, and there we can see features, requirements, use cases, test cases, defects. And so this is where I got the document ID 3, is I wanted this set of requirements from this project. And project 1, if we jump down here to our project table, is going to be the sample data that's shipped with the system. So we'll scroll over here and see this is our Coverage Plus system. So this is great. However, I happen to already know the database, and you probably do not. And so the best way to get a feeling for how the database works is to either take some of the queries from our sample reports and see what sorts of results you can get with those, or you can go to jamasoftware.com and review the schema. So here, within the schema, we have all the different tables and all the information. The best place to start is the document. And so the document, again, is that item. And as you scroll through it, you can see all the different fields that are available here that have been stored with that, as well as all of the different tables that it's connected to. So as I zoom out here, you can see that this document table has a lot of different relationships within the system. So it's all documented. You can follow all these different pieces and see how they all interrelate, but it's all here within the jamasoftware.com/schema. So it's a great place to start to get familiar with how the information in Contour is stored. So now that we have this information and we've tinkered with the query and we've got it to where we want it to be, now we can take this query. I'm just going to select all and copy it and take it back to BIRT. Here we can now say add new data set. We're going to do a Jdbc Datasource, so that our Contour data source, we want it to be a SQL select query, and then I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call set items, and this is whatever you want to name it. It's just something to help you pick it out of the list and to work with it later. And now I'm going to take my query and paste it in. So again, you could have created this query within BIRT. You do have a table browser, and you can open up the different tables and see the fields there. But I do feel that creating a query is best done in a database tool. Once I've pasted my query in, I can say finish. And now I'll have the ability to set some properties. So it's gone through, it's parsed out my query, it's found all the different fields and the display names. We can see that there are currently no parameters, but I can do a preview of results. And so we can see here that I have the same information available to me that I had within the database tool. The interesting piece here, though, is that we do have the description available. And as we look through our description, you can see that that rich text field is actually storing HTML. And so that's something we need to consider in our report, is how to best show the HTML. So now we have our data set, but what we still don't have is a report template. So before we start putting data in, we need to kind of set up our report. So the first thing we're going to want to do is maybe set up a header or a title. To do this, we're going to go to our palette and select from our list of report items that we want to put onto the report. I find the easiest way to start is to start with a grid, and this grid will allow us to organize the information that we want. And so I might want to have a label over here, and again I can get to this via the right click menu. So we're going to call it report title, not very original, and I'm going to change the font size, and you can work with HTML or you can work with the true points. I'm going to do 18 point title. I'm going to make it bold, and I'm going to underline it. Now we could have done colors and backgrounds and lots of things as well, but this is probably enough for today. And I also want to insert a logo. Now I'm going to just insert a simple image. This could be your company logo or whatever you want. I'm going to embed it, so this means it's going to be with the report. It's not going to be pulling it from somewhere. So I'm going to add this image just from a saved location I have. So I'm going to go to my custom reports area and pick my gears image, and so once we have that done, we can get a preview from it and insert it. Now this is obviously much bigger than the cell that I want it from, so I can simply resize it to fit the space that I want it to fit in. And then here I could also play with the different pieces, so I may want to merge these cells together perhaps, or do something along those lines. And so a lot of the same features that you would have from Word or from Excel you can get here as you're setting up your report. So once I've put my report together and I've got a title up here and some gears, I may want to insert some data. So the thing to think about is, how do you want the data organized? And so for me, I'm just going to want it a simple name, the ID, and then maybe the description. And so I want to lay this out in a consistent manner. And so now I'm going to pick a table. So the difference between a table and a grid is that the grid is simply a way of laying out the information, whereas a table is actually going to be connected to the data source. And so I can bind this table to my query that we created earlier. We're going to have 3 columns. I'm going to have 2 rows of details, and I'll pick the data set here, that set items that I selected earlier. So now we can see we have header rows, detail rows, and footer rows. And for each row in that query is going to put in a new detail row. I wanted 2 detail rows because I wanted to have my name and my identifier on the top row and then my description on the second row. So again, we can insert dynamic text, or we could actually grab and drop from our Data Explorer. So as we opened up our list here, I could have dragged in my name, and I can drag in the document key. And so the document key is really just the identifier that you see. So this is just the database name. So this is something as you explore the database you'll see. Now I don't want the labels that are put in by default, so I can just delete these from the header row. Now the last thing I want is a description. However, I'm going to merge these 3 together because I want it to have the whole page to be input. And I'm going to drag this value in as well. So now I've got my name, my document key, my description, a title, and an image. So I'm going to save this and then do a preview. So the preview here will give you an HTML version of your report. You do have the option of running this report from the tool and putting it into these different formats. So you can have a document, HTML, PDF, so all the different options that you could have in Contour here, you can run them as well without going into the tool. So we've got our preview. We can see that we have our gears and our report title, and it's the right font. Our description, so this is the label that we got by default. We forgot to remove that. But now, besides the overview and the key, we can see that our description contains all of this rich text. And so the reason for that is because we just dumped the data directly into the template. What we needed to do was to put it into a dynamic text field, so BIRT would first review that data, potentially work some JavaScript or render the HTML, and then put it out into the form. So to remedy that, I'm going to delete that. I'm going to delete that label I didn't want. I'm going to now insert a dynamic text field. So our dynamic text field is where we could have actually put in some JavaScript. We could have done some fancier HTML pieces, so you have access to the HTML DOM, and so anything that you could do on a normal HTML page you could do within here. But I just want to show the information that we have. And so I'm going to go see the available column bindings, and these column bindings actually are going to take the available bindings that are there. And so we have our table here that we initially set up. When we set it up, it was bound to that data set we created. And so since our dynamic text is within this table, by default we are going to be bound to the table's value. Now we could have bound that to something else if we wanted to, but for our simple report we're happy just to grab the description from here. So now you can see this is actually going to be an expression. We can test the expression and find that it's going to work for us. But we could have also put in some JavaScript values or other HTML pieces. So now we come back to our report. I'm going to save it again and then do another preview. So this time our preview is going to render the text within the HTML prior to putting it on the page. And so now we can see we've got the text, it's inserted the different images as well as the tables and all the other information that was in the report. Now this isn't very pretty, but it's given you some insight into what you can do. So we could come through, we could have actually bolded maybe the names, we could have inserted some padding between the different rows and the different items. There's a lot of different things you can do here once you get the information into the report. So the last thing I want to do on my formatting is to go to my master page, and this is the page where information is going to show on every page of that report if I had a Word document, and I'm going to insert a page numbering. So on my palette, when I have switched over to this page, BIRT automatically gives me some options here. And so I could have a confidential statement, a page number, a lot of the standard pieces of information that you would want. And I'm just going to take the page N of M. So we'll drop this over and we'll see. We'll have page number with the divider and the total number of pages. Now this is not going to be very pretty initially, but you can see how you can move these values around to get what you need. So now I'm going to save this again, and this time let's run it as a Word document so we can get a better feel for how this is going to look once it's come out. So once it's ran, we can open it, and here we can see we have our image, we have the title, we have an overview, we have a key, and then we have the descriptive text. Here at the bottom we can see we have our page, 1 out of 10, and as we scroll through we have the information. So again, it's not very pretty. We can spend a lot of time within the report designer here making things pretty, but I think that's just something you're going to need to spend some time on to figure out how you want it to be in the report. Also, BIRT provides a lot of information on working with the tool and doing different configurations. My main thing is I want to make sure that you're comfortable creating a report, getting the contour information in it, and getting it into contour. And so along those lines, the next thing we want to do is insert a parameter. And to do that, we're going to go back to the data set item that we created and go through our query and replace that hard-coded value we had put in before. So now, instead of having it spit out the requirement set each time, it's going to ask us for a parameter. And to do that, we're just simply going to insert a question mark where we had that hard-coded value before. And now when I click on our parameters options, we can see that it knows that there's a parameter there. Once we're here, we need to set up our parameter correctly. You can give it a name if you want, but there's really no advantage to it other than being able to easily identify it. The data type is going to be an integer, so we're going to be sending it that same number that we hard-coded earlier. And so here we can link it to a report parameter. We haven't actually created any report parameters yet, and so we can create one now. So we're going to call it report underscore set name, and this can be whatever you want, but you just need to remember when you set it up in contour, this is the value in the parameter list that you're going to need to enter. So this information is not very important because contour is going to give it the information, and so This information is only valuable if you intend to test the report within BIRT or potentially even run the report outside of Contour. So this will provide you with the different ways of inserting the parameters. We know that it's an integer, and if we wanted to, we can set a default value. And so here, that value 3 will work for us again. So now we can preview our results, and we'll get that same result list again. So now we can come back. I'm going to save our report. And so now I'm going to upload this report into Contour. So we'll go into our application, we'll go into the administration area, and so now we'll upload this report. I've uploaded that sample report earlier so that we could view the example, but you'll come in here, likely this will be empty if you haven't created any reports. So I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it Test BIRT. We'll select the report type, which is BIRT. I'm going to select HTML, PDF, and Microsoft Word as the output options. We'll browse to our file. So this is where you've saved that template that you've been working on. We could have a description or an organization. This is just going to be your company name. The visible to users is just a way of showing or hiding it. The class path is an option where you could actually upload a Java class and have some work done on the server. This is not something that's going to affect our report. It's probably not something you're going to need to worry about. And now we want to add the criteria. So our criteria, we're going to want to have a set. We're going to want to say set name, and so this is going to be the information that the user sees to tell them that they need to pick a set, and then the name. And so this is that same name back in BIRT. Now this is going to be case sensitive, so you're going to want to make sure you put it in the same way as it was in BIRT. So once we save this, we can go to our project and test our report. So it's going to be in the reports, and we're going to have our test report here. If we've done correctly, it should be in our global reports section. I can run this as a PDF, and then I'm going to select features just to see if our parameters working correctly. Now that our report's run, we can see we still have our title, we have our gears, we have our name, and our description, and the ID. We're actually looking at features so we know our parameter worked, and we can scroll through here and see our information. So this concludes our BIRT section for reporting. I hope you can see the different ways you can get information from the Contour database now into the BIRT tool. I hope that you explore BIRT's resources for creating more sophisticated reports than we did today. The goal here was to familiarize you with connecting to the Contour database, creating a data set and parameter that Contour could use, and then installing this report into Contour. If you have any issues, please contact Jama support. Thank you.